3/4 pounds, the Australian light middleweight champion, Charkey Ramon.
By the time the 1970s arrived, one of Bobby Dunlop's neighbours from Maroubra had taken over as a major draw card. Dave Ballard was living at Bernie Hall's gym when Bernie gave him the name Charkey Ramon.
I'm announcing the ring of Charkey Ramon. And I said to Bernie, what do you mean by that? He said, well, there's the famous boxers in Mexico called Raymond, he said, and the Sharky's a charcoal out of the American Negro, he said. And I've got a fighter in you, he said, with the American Negro ability and the Mexican punching power. I looked at him and thought, oh. Then I started to wonder, was he all right?
Charkey grew up on a huge grazing property at Gulgong near Mudgee. He became a millionaire in the demolition business and as a kid found a quid in the boxing tent shows. His career lasted less than 4 years, but it was spectacular. In this fight, he hit the canvas for the first time in his life against Commonwealth Junior middleweight champ Pat Dwyer.
I had a huge inspiration to be the best, and I didn't think anyone could beat me. And the next minute, I thought he was even out of range when he hit me. He come out like a big orangutan and went whack, whack, and down I went and hit the floor, and I thought, God.
The knockdown spurred Charkey into action. As the Commonwealth champion, Charkey became the top contender to world champ Koichi Wajima of Japan. And he was devastating against Canadian Donato Paduano in Sydney.
And Donato Paduano on the receiving end of buckled his knees that time. A very solid left. His knees buckled, he's holding on grimly. Only a few seconds to go to end the round. And Paduano is back in 15 seconds to go, and it may be stopped. Referee Mitchell has stopped the fight.
Charkey went on to beat the ferocious Frenchman Jacques Kishikin in Umeå. But then, as quick as one of his left rips, he quit the fight game after a surfing accident. Boxing's foremost body puncher was finished. However, a decade later, he made a brief comeback while refereeing a bout at the Sydney Opera House between Alex Temelkov and Ken Salisbury. Charkey found himself in the middle of a battle that was to be known as World War III.
One of the cornermen, the fight's still going, and one of the cornermen from Temelkov's corner, Charkey Ramon, the referee, is trying to stop it. The cornerman's down. Charkey Ramon is now fighting with one of the cornermen. The fight will have to win. Charkey Ramon throwing everything. Bernie Hall is now throwing punches. There are other people in the ring. There must be 20 people in the ring. Punches flying everywhere.
Two of the great personalities of TV Ringside.
By the late 60s, television and boxing enjoyed a blissful marriage, and TV Ringside became a Monday night television staple. There were so many stars who appeared on Ringside. Hector Thompson and Manny Santos, Hilary Connolly and Leo Young in this fight, Bobby Dunn and Toro George, to name just a few. But Ron Casey has no doubt about the two best.
It was almost a dead heat between Famechon and Rose because they were great fighters, both of them, and so different.
Paul Moore, in the white trunks here, beating Wayne Bannister, won an Australian welterweight title, as did his brother Alan, and he also accounted for another ringside star, Rocky Mattioli.
I remember Mattioli as being a very, very strong, hard puncher, but probably was a little bit suspect to boxers, which I used to box a bit in those days. So, but you know, that was the experience. Like he went on to win a world title, so I feel, I wanted to afford him.
Nearly a decade later, in 1978, Mattioli rebounded to face this man, Elisha Obed, a male model from the Bahamas, for the World Junior middleweight title at Kooyong. Obed had no answer to Mattioli's power. Mattioli may have been explosive, but Ron Casey, the host of Ringside, said the show's most exciting performer was Kahu Mahanga.
He wasn't the greatest middleweight that ever was, there's no doubt about that. But there was something about him, and for television, he was perfect. He was handsome, he looked the part, he could punch, a little bit slow, but he was a great draw cut.
Kahu Mahanga, in the white shorts, was a Kiwi KO machine. His biggest moment came here, when he derailed a young Tony Mundine. These days, Tony Mundine leads a quiet life and spends time nearly every day at Luigi Colucci's coffee bar. But as a fighter, he was sensational, scoring 65 knockouts, winning 4 Australian titles and 2 Commonwealth titles. He was born into abject poverty. His childhood home was a shack his father built by the Clarence River at Bayougal near Grafton.
Back in the days we had no power, no phones or no running water. We had to walk to the nearest creek for mum to wash our clothes, and we used to have a swim in the river or the creek to have our bath or shower, whatever.
Mundine came to Sydney to get a job and to play football. He went to Ern McQuillan's gym to keep fit. Ern McQuillan Jr. remembers his dad's excitement at another prospective champion.
The first day that he was in the gym, his dad put the mitts on him, and straight away it was there. He said, "Have you ever boxed before, son?" He said, "No, I've never had the gloves on in my life." Just a natural, you know.
Mundine made a spectacular rise, devastating opponents with his power and freakish speed. But he suffered early setbacks against Mahunga and former world champ Luis Rodriguez, and was savaged by critics as a fighter who could dish it out but couldn't take it. Referee and commentator Gus Mercurio always disagreed.
When he got hit, he had a problem. Now, a lot of people use this glass jaw type situation. When Tony got hit by Cal Mahunga, and I was there that night, the punch Cal hit Tony with would have knocked over a building, right? When Tony got hit by Luis Rodriguez in 49 seconds of the first round at North Melbourne, that punch would have knocked over an army tank.
Alan Moore had no doubt Mundine could make it to the top.
I probably sparred more rounds with Tony than most other men. Tony was a great fighter. Great fighter.
Moore and Mundine topped the bill at Sydney Stadium in 1970 against a pair of Filipinos. It was the old barn's last blast before she made way for the Eastern Suburbs railway line.
Harry Miller was a promoter, God rest his soul, at that time. And Harry put on over the years some rather slightly indifferent bouts, for want of a better word. and so some bloke, all sitting there quiet, and then some bloke got up and said, "Harry, you've done it robbed us for the last time." Brought the house down, and we just packed up and went home.
Commonwealth middleweight champion Australia's Tony Mundine clashes with world-rated American Danny Moyer in a scheduled 10-round contest at Sydney's Holland Pavilion.
When Mundine was winning, there was no fighter quite so spectacular. He beat some of the world's best boxers, including former world junior middleweight champ Danny Moyer. Tony was a hit wherever he went, especially in Paris, where he manhandled the legendary Emile Griffith.
And the next morning, the French papers, Paris papers, came out with Mundine, another Sugar Ray Robinson. I thought, oh, isn't this marvellous?
In 1973, the world middleweight champ was Argentina's Carlos Monzon, a former pimp and sometimes movie star who was unbeaten in the last 13 years of his career. Mundine was the #1 contender. Mundine, in the dark T-shirt, sparring with Al Coraville, lost to American Benny Briscoe in 1973. But he still earned a shot at Monzon in October 1974 at Luna Park in Buenos Aires. Bill Morty covered the fight for Sydney's Daily Mirror.
Monzon wasn't the most popular person in Buenos Aires, but fight night he certainly was. Anyway, all of the prelims fell short. And so there were these long drags in time. So they'd start to beat drums and they'd blow trumpets and they'd shake the cage. And then they'd start a chant. I said, "What are they saying?" They said, "Monzon is king, Monzon lives forever." And it was an eerie chant. It was going straight down the tunnel, you know, to where Mundine was waiting to come out for his chance at his title. And, you know, when Tony came out, he didn't look the most confident person in the world, and I don't blame him.
Mundine gave a brilliant performance early, but faded in round 7.
Big right hand. That was a good punch, but he's got to throw more. And Tony, a flurry of punches from now, just putting the Australian down in round 7.
But Mundine still packed out stadiums in Australia and Europe. He beat Steve Axel for the Commonwealth light heavyweight title and for years hovered around the world ratings. Tony is proud that he never touched alcohol, tobacco or drugs, something he instilled into his son Anthony, one of the hottest rugby league players in Australia. The tragedy of Tony Mundine's career is that he came along when Carlos Monzon was virtually invincible.